So Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has tapped his top ministers to address things like Western concerns. Chrystia Freeland, now the Deputy Prime Minister and Intergovernmental Affairs Minister. Seamus O'Regan takes over Natural Resources file. He's in Alberta this weekend. Jim Carr is the Special Representative for the Prairies, but out of cabinet. And Catherine McKenna is the new Infrastructure Minister. She will now be in charge of a $180 billion infrastructure plan. Can this so-called all-star lineup bridge the Western divide? Are they open to changes to the controversial environmental regulations bill, or as Alberta Premier Jason Kenney calls it, the No More Pipelines bill, in order to get stuff built? Let's find out. Infrastructure Minister Catherine McKenna joins us. Congratulations on the new appointment. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
A lot of the people you're going to have to deal with, Doug Ford and Jason Kenney, you clashed with them. You were emblematic of everything they didn't like about the government because of the carbon price. Now you've got to deal with them, and you're coming with $180 billion. How do you work with Kenney and Ford?
Well, I think Canadians want infrastructure built. That's better public transit. That's everything, from I just met with Telesat, a great company that's providing broadband to rural areas. That means, affordable housing. And so we need to get things done. And I think you saw a positive sign. The Prime Minister met with Premier Ford. I think that it's important that we remember that we serve Canadians. And so I will be working with provinces for sure in the infrastructure file and mayors.
Okay, but the question is how. Let's talk about some infrastructure that has been at the heart of the prairie alienation, which is Pipelines Bill C-69, which is the environmental assessment. You were very much a part of that in your old portfolio. Jason Kenney, Scott Moe, Nad Nenshi, they call it the No More Pipelines Bill. They want that to be changed. They want that to be reassessed. These are infrastructure bills. The government owns that Trans Mountain Pipeline. Are you open to changing C-69, revoking it, rebuilding it, or reassessing it?
So it's actually the Impact Assessment Act. So it's not even a bill. It's actually legislation that's out there. And the new minister, Jonathan Wilkinson, who is great. He was my parliamentary secretary, Minister of Fisheries and Oceans before. He's been clear. We're not reopening the legislation, but implementation is key.
So what does that mean, implementation?
Well, the bill, this act is just coming into force. So we have people, saying all sorts of things about it, but no project has gone through it yet. In fact, we saw the problems. You see the problems with the twinning the TMX pipeline. That had to do with that legislation that was under Stephen Harper, the previous legislation. This is a good piece of legislation, but it's got to work. And I'm someone who always have talked about the importance of the environment, the economy. There's $500 billion of investment, potential investment, in major projects, and we need this to work and go ahead.
Something's got to change. I mean, minister after minister keeps saying, we're listening, we're going to recalibrate, and then you say, okay, do something substantive. They want that change. You say, well, the old one was bad, this is really good. So it just sounds like it's fake consultation, that you're saying you're going to listen, but you're really just doing the same thing you did last time, and now you've got a prairie fire burning. What will change to get infrastructure built?
Well, we were able to get infrastructure built in the last 4 years, and we're going to continue doing that. This is a good piece of legislation, and everyone should be committed to getting investment. I mean, I don't think it's helpful if you have folks saying, don't invest in Canada because you're not going to be able to get a project through. That's a really good way to not get projects through.
But with all due respect, when McKenna leaves, it's not because people are talking it down. When your government buys the Keystone X or the Trans Mountain Pipeline, it's because you don't have a proponent that wants to do it because they're saying it's the legislation. When will your government just own accountability? People are leaving. You've had to spend $4.5 billion to buy a pipeline. Will it get built, and will you change something to make sure more get built?
So infrastructure projects have gone ahead. As I said, the problem with TMX was a problem that was created under the previous legislation. So we made changes. We consulted for 3 years on this legislation, including with industry. Many industry players think it's a lot better. But I do agree. So let's just step back. Do we need to get to a better place with the people of Saskatchewan and Alberta? Absolutely. There was a message this election, and people are mad, and we understand that, and we need to be working better. And I think that's why you have Jim Carr.
I get all that, but let's get substance. I know you've got Jim Carr, and I know you're everyone, but let's get substance. So I'll ask you this. The courts are holding up the Trans Mountain Pipeline. It's a big piece of infrastructure. We've got $4.5 billion invested in that. Would your government be open to using constitutional powers in the national interest if the courts continue to hold this up to make sure that pipeline goes through? Is that in your arsenal?
So the pipeline is being built. And I think that's what's really important. I don't think we need to go relitigate all this. We are absolutely committed to getting the pipeline built.
I just what the facts are, there are 6 First Nations holding it up in court. If one of them wins, it doesn't get built. So then the question is, it goes back into your court. It's your infrastructure project. You can decide to pull the other lever, which is constitutional powers. Are you open to that?
So there's an obligation in this country, the duty to consult and accommodate for Indigenous peoples. We feel that we have met that and that the court will demonstrate that, and we're moving ahead. But more broadly, I would agree with you. We do need to get to a better spot. I think we have to really focus on how do we improve lives of people across Canada. That includes Saskatchewan, that includes Alberta, and I think the rhetoric should calm down.
Over the weekend, and the continuing issue with the CN strike and the propane problem. Jason Kenney said, if you want propane Quebec and no longer these shortages in the event of more strikes, build a pipeline. And there is actually a pipeline that you could support, and I'm wondering if you support it. And it's the Energy Saguenay pipeline. It's a $14 billion pipeline and LNG terminal that would go from Alberta to the Saguenay. It's supported not only by Jason Kenney, but Premier Legault in Quebec. 10,000 jobs, $14 billion, pipeline from Alberta to Quebec, liquefied natural gas. Would you, as the infrastructure minister, support that?
Well, let's be clear. There's an environmental assessment process. It has to go through the process. But look, I think...
I understand, but do you support it? I mean, it's a big piece of infrastructure. It's jobs. It's LNG. I mean, it solves some real problems. It's infrastructure. It's on your plate. What's your sense of it? Is that something you would support? So
it actually has to go through an environmental assessment process, and that's not, I am no longer in good news, Evan. I don't know if you got the news release, but I am the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, and I mean, of course I support building good infrastructure, but we still have to have a process, and so that's what's important. But I do think that we need provinces to work together, the federal government, and we need to realize there's a whole big world out there, and people aren't every day waking up thinking about Canada as a place to invest. We have to make it attractive to investment, and we need to work together. All provinces need to work together. That's why I'm very excited about this file, because it's building real things.
So what are your three priorities? What are the 3 big priorities that will define your time here in terms of your investment?
Well, I think we need to we need to be building projects. So actually getting projects done, that is incredibly important. I think we need to make sure that we have a climate lens. And you could say, well, what does that mean? We're building projects for the next 50 years. And we look at the opportunity to do it in lower emissions, which also, if you take transit, public transit is an incredible way for people to get around faster, cleaner, cheaper. And so those are major projects that'll make a huge difference.
I understand you're building for the next 50 years, but there are people listening to you and go, thanks, I got to pay my mortgage in the next 50 days. There's 100,000 people out of jobs in Calgary. There's people who are suffering, farmers who can't harvest because they can't get the propane. 50 years sounds great. I want 50 hours from now. Where will you spend the infrastructure dollars to stimulate the economy, create jobs, and get stuff done?
Well, that's what we're doing. So the investments that we've already made in infrastructure projects and the investments we're continuing to make. I've been to work already. I met with Mayor Naheed Nenshi from Calgary, talking about real opportunities there with public transit, how we can work with the province on that. And I talked to John Tory, talked to him about Metro, about the Metro line. I also met with Kennedy Stewart, the Mayor of Vancouver. They've got a huge plan, a really ambitious plan for better public transit. That's getting people to their homes faster, cheaper, cleaner. And I agree, we've got to move forward on these projects. And we also have to look at...
Is there one that you can just tell me before I let you go? Is there one project that you think, I know it's brand new portfolio. I get it, but is there one that you say, you know what, people want to see governments get stuff done. You got to knock something down here. What is something you can get done?
Well, I'm excited about the opportunity in Toronto. I think that there's some real momentum around the Metro line and some interest for that. So I've been on the I've been on the job 1 day, so I'm not going to commit to something yet, but don't worry, I'm on it. And I think I've demonstrated my goal is to deliver. I delivered on the climate file. We moved forward, and there were some tough times for sure. But that's what we need to do. We need to get things built, and that's workers, that's jobs, that's good economic impacts, and also that's a way to make sure that we're tackling climate change and building climate resilient communities.
I just want to pick up on that last one. You released a video on the day of the government announcement, the new government, and you were crying in it. Now, I know you're talking about your kids, you were cleaning out your office, but you had a tough campaign. You had security threats, you had that horrific graffiti, you became the subject of an enormous amount of social media criticism, a lot of it very vile. it seemed to take a toll, frankly, personally. And when I saw that video, I thought, it's really taken a toll personally. Like, how tough was that to be the lightning rod of all that stuff, the threats? Was that part of that when you were after that campaign, when you say it was a tough campaign? How much of a toll did all that take?
Well, to put the video in context, I was cleaning up my office, so I just found objects, and so I was doing different videos of objects. The last one I ended up was a calendar that my kids did, which actually was positive in the sense you turned over, there were 10 days left, and you turned it over, you got an inspirational quote. But I think this was a really tough campaign, not just for me personally, but there was that, but it was for Canadians.
But it was tough. I understand that, but it was tough for you personally. Because it was tough. I get it. It was a minority government. It was a divisive campaign. But you became the symbol of a lot of stuff. You took a lot of it. It was really personal. The stuff that was written on your office was disgraceful. Did that take a toll on you? I mean, this is your second election. I'm just trying to get at that.
You know what? Politics takes a toll. And I am a mom first, and I also have kids who didn't sign up for this. But they're incredible because they really support me. They believe in what I'm doing. They believe that this makes a difference. And one thing I've learned in this job, that you have to keep it real. You have to talk like a real person, and if I show a bit of emotion and that makes people feel a bit uncomfortable, well, I'm a woman in politics and I'm just gonna own it. And I also think we can do better. And I think that's one reflection from this election, the tone, the rhetoric, the approach, the hate, but the misinformation. We owe it as politicians and as Canadians to do better. We can be a model for the world. We're extremely lucky to live in an incredibly beautiful, prosperous country. Maybe not everyone is succeeding. We need everyone to succeed. We got to hold on to that. We can't let what we've seen in other countries, the hate, the divisiveness, drive us. I really believe that. That was why I got into politics. If I got a little emotional, it's a little weird maybe for some folks, but I'm okay with that.
Great. I appreciate that. Thanks,
Thank you.
Minister. Thanks so much.